This is the 5-minute guide to the Ersatz Monarch class battleships of the Austro-Hungarian Navy. Much like the Mackensen class discussed last week, these ships were a class designed and ordered but never completed. Also like the Imperial German Navy, the Austro-Hungarian Navy followed the tradition of naming the ships after the vessels they were supposed to replace, which is Ersatz in German, until the hull was actually launched. Since none of these ships made it to the launching stage, we do not know what they would have been called. They are simply the Ersatz Monarch class, since they were supposed to replace the Monarch pre-Dreadnought coastal defense battleships. The class would have been the second class of dreadnought battleship built for Austria-Hungary, after the Tjetov class. Because Austria-Hungary was somewhat late to the dreadnought building game, they found themselves in the somewhat unique situation of having a very powerful class of dreadnoughts armed with 12-inch guns, just as the leading powers were moving towards super dreadnoughts with 13.5, 14, and 15-inch weapons. As such, the Austro-Hungarian battleship development line effectively skipped the first-generation dreadnought and first-generation super dreadnought stages, instead generating a pair of designs which reflected the second generation of each type. The Ersatz Monarch class being the latter design. Initially, the design for a Tjetov class successor was a fairly simple and conservative upgrade of the existing ship with triple 13.5-inch guns instead of 12-inch guns. However, a second wave of designs were submitted, including a ship with 12-inch guns, a ship with 13.6-inch guns and a ship with 13.8-inch guns. Because of the close cooperation of Germany and Austria-Hungary at the time, the fact that the Germans had just selected the 13.8-inch caliber gun for the Mackensen class greatly influenced the Austro-Hungarian thinking, and the design with this weapon was selected. Not that this stopped the design department trying to come up with further ideas. Between the initial selection of the design and the final formal approval, no fewer than 12 other designs were submitted. As designed, the standard displacement of the ships was just over 4,000 tons greater than their predecessors, and for this extra weight there was a slight increase in armor and speed, but 1 inch to 12 inches, and 1 knot to 21 knots, as well as enough fuel for an additional 800 miles range at cruising speeds, for a total of a 5,000-mile operational radius. Again, much like the Mackensen class, the ships were planned to use a mix of oil and coal-fired boilers to power the engines. The main armament would consist of 10 13.8-inch weapons in 4 turrets, a pair super-firing forward, and another pair super-firing at the rear. Due to the additional weight of these guns compared to the 12-inch weapons previously used, it was not possible to match the previous 12 on the limited increase in displacement alongside all the other improvements. Instead, the 10 guns were arranged with the lower turret of each pair being a triple turret and the upper turret being a twin turret. The rest of the armament consisted of 14 single casemate mounted 5.9-inch guns, which represented an additional pair over the Tjetovs, alongside 16 4-inch guns, a pair less than the 18 2.8-inch guns of their predecessors, but a considerably heavier tertiary broadside. 5 torpedo tubes completed the weapons loadout. The biggest change in design, compared to previous ships, was underwater protection. Some might uncharitably say that the main difference was that this design actually had some, given the vulnerability of previous Austro-Hungarian ships to flooding, but this is not exactly fair given that many other nations' early dreadnoughts had some pretty questionable choices made when it came to resisting mines and torpedoes. The Austro-Hungarian idea was to install second armor deck at the bottom of the armor belt that extended all the way back to the vertical bulkheads, an idea similar to Russian and French concepts at the time. The principle being that the outer parts of the ship below the armor belt were then effectively boxed away from the rest of the ship, and could therefore be flooded to a degree without risking the rest of the ship. The first ship was to have been laid down in July 1914, with the second in 1915 and the last pair in 1916, with the aim to have them coming into service between 1917 and 1919. However, due to the outbreak of the First World War, the first ship's starting date was pushed back to September 1914 and then suspended, so the class ended up not ever being properly started as far as construction is concerned. By late 1917, all work on the ships had been cancelled. In the end, only the guns of the first ship were ever built, 4 of which were eventually sent to the Italian front. to help the Austro-Hungarian army, the rest being taken by the French as war prizes at the end of war. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.